Hello, my name's Fraser. I'm a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music at the University of Melbourne. I'll be giving a brief overview of my PhD about social connection and intercultural understanding through music practice. I'd like to thank my supervisors, Professor Jane Davidson and Dr. Alex Crook from the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music, and Professor Yoshika Shima from the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences. One of the main questions I'm trying to address in the PhD is whether music can play a role in social connection and intercultural understanding in culturally diverse settings. We understand music to play a role in social bonding through mechanisms like coordination and imitation, emotional contagion, empathy, and social cognition. There's a huge cultural diversity in musical styles, but there are also similarities observed across cultures, both in form and social function. And there's some evidence that listening to music of a particular culture can increase feelings of affiliation with that culture. Participatory music is understood to facilitate social connection, both through a sense of identity, and sometimes it's conceptualized in terms of social capital and building bonding capital. Music practice is understood, I mentioned, in forming identity, and this has been looked at in terms of identity for diasporic communities, but also as a locus for emerging cultural identity with the integration of diverse cultural influences through music observed particularly among second and third generation migrants. Experiences arising from globalization and frameworks by which we understand these experiences, such as interculturalism and superdiversity, suggest that categorical treatments of culture arising from some research paradigms might tell only a very small part of the story. I was fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, to begin my PhD journey in 2020, just before COVID-19 lockdown. And during that time, apart from the incredible rate of infection and fatality, we saw other social disruptions, including increases in racism and discrimination. But more hopefully, we saw this proliferation of online music engagement through virtual choirs and orchestras. While initially the research aimed to consider the role of intercultural music engagement in fostering social cohesion and intercultural understanding, observing these adaptations via digital mediums to music engagement shifted the research somewhat. So, having reviewed literature across disciplines about the social role of music, social rituals, including both digitally mediated and in person, social capital, and online communities, I was still curious to understand to what extent does online and offline music engagement enhance opportunities for building intercultural understanding and social connection? What characteristics distinguish online from offline intercultural music engagement? What are the characteristics of brokers in intercultural music engagement in a technology-mediated world? And how effective are hybrid approaches combining both online and offline approaches to intercultural music engagement in building social connection? The research is multi-phased and mixed methods. It's underpinned by a pragmatic philosophy and draws on social network analysis, digital ethnography, and participatory action research. The decision to use ethnographic approaches is partially due to my own lived experience. I'm an Indonesian Australian and have worked for many years performing and teaching in intercultural music and dance contexts. My cultural identity draws me to other scholars occupying liminal positions and to dynamic conceptualizations of culture. I'm a practicing psychologist trained in community psychology, and community psychology tends to take a social ecological perspective, looking at community and population level interventions involving community decision making and drawing on community strengths. and participatory action research fits with this approach. So a snapshot of the project, it's ultimately building to the design of a program logic for a hybrid intercultural music intervention, incorporating both face-to-face and digital formats. 2 studies have been completed, an observation of audience engagement with YouTube music broadcasts during lockdown, and a participatory action research project exploring asynchronous multi-tracking performance for intercultural music engagement. In progress are a social network analysis of music communities and an integrative literature review of programs using music to facilitate social connection and intercultural understanding. A paper regarding the YouTube study has been published with Professor Jane Davidson and Dr. Alex Crook as co-authors. So using a digital ethnographic approach, I monitored my social media accounts through most of 2020 and watched and interacted with online music broadcasts. Drawing on theories on digitally mediated social ritual, we were interested in exploring the ritual elements of audience engagement with these YouTube music broadcasts, the role they played in engendering a shared identity, the interaction between different cultural identities, and how community resilience was enacted through online music engagement. From a larger set of cases, 8 cases were selected for thematic analysis, with 5 overarching themes. In order of prevalence, they were interaction, unity, resilience, identity, and emotion. So the data pointed to the capacity to interact and share information on platforms like YouTube, with conversations emerging between audience members and with musicians and producers. A prominent theme was unity, encapsulating a shared sense of identity through participating in music together. Resilience was identified as a theme, with people sharing pandemic-related experiences and reflecting on the way music was helping them to cope. Comments suggested that specific cultural knowledge and representation was important to people, and some people expressed emotion through their comments, with some quite embodied responses, such as "gave me goosebumps." The participatory action research project investigated the process of 6 experienced practitioners adapting to COVID-19 lockdown using this asynchronous multi-tracking approach. I participated as a dancer and a researcher, and together with 3 musicians, my Egyptian dance teacher, and a filmmaker, we created a performance in the style of Ashra Balladi, an Egyptian improvisational form of music and dance. We were exploring the affordances and constraints we encountered in creating this performance, the social processes involved in collaborating remotely, and the role of both digital platforms and music and dance engagement in facilitating intercultural understanding. An autoethnographic account of this research has been published, which delves more into the experience of cultural identity in culturally diverse contexts and how intercultural music engagement can be navigated in a respectful way. We experience various affordances and constraints of technology in the creation of the performance, but overall, the process permitted a triangulated perspective, which included 1, access and observation of cultural artifacts online, 2, in-depth engagement with the form through the process of sharing knowledge and planning, and 3, the embodied practice of engaging in music and dance, albeit we were doing that in solitude at the time. Drawing from theories about social capital, brokerage, and knowledge diffusion, as well as theories about intergroup ideologies, including colorblindness, multiculturalism, and polyculturalism, the social network study considers music as a way of sharing cultural information and practice, and it's guided by these questions. 1, how does knowledge of music genres travel through networks of music practitioners? 2, what role do brokers and institutions play? 3, what role do beliefs about culture play? And 4, what were the experiences of musicians during COVID-19 lockdown? Data collection was via snowball sampling and online survey and concluded in August this year, and analysis is ongoing. The graph pictured illustrates the music collaboration networks of the 103 respondents, many of whom are professional musicians who nominated numerous people with whom they collaborate musically with. So the graph shows a network of in excess of 1,500 people. The respondents engage in a variety of cultural genres of music. 195 genres were nominated in total, and collectively they play 135 different types of instruments. The analysis will look at the characteristics of highly active musicians in the network and whether beliefs about culture influence the cultural diversity of the music communities. And there'll also be a qualitative analysis of some of the open-ended questions included about their experience of COVID-19 lockdown. And there are a few example quotes included there. And finally, the integrative literature review is being conducted. And this type of review is considered appropriate as the literature is drawing from a range of disciplines, theoretical standpoints, and research methods. So this approach allows a synthesis of these varied perspectives. The aim of the review is to explore programs for adults, both face-to-face and digitally mediated formats, using music to facilitate social connection and intercultural understanding. Specifically looking over the last 10 years, what's been written about programs of these kinds, how is program effectiveness assessed and what theoretical bases underpin the research, what processes are understood to improve effectiveness, and do these differ depending on whether they're face-to-face or digitally mediated. And the literature review, the search includes entry of search terms to 5 databases and other search strategies, including author and expert topic knowledge and screening reference lists are also included. So at the moment, 35 articles that span psychology, ethnomusicology, pedagogy, and leisure studies are being considered for relevance and quality. A lot of research was written over COVID-19 lockdown about how digital platforms fulfilled a need for social connection, but was generally experienced, it was a subpar experience, let's say, for many musicians. And this is corroborated to some extent through the studies that I've just spoken about. However, another way to look at this is that face-to-face versus digitally mediated collaboration each offer different affordances. While the spontaneity of face-to-face interaction and its inherently embodied nature may facilitate trust and group improvisation, digitally mediated interaction offers other affordances such as the sharing of cultural artifacts online, in-depth engagement with information and cultural knowledge, and the scope to extend reach. And embodiment is not entirely absent from digitally mediated interaction. Brokerage emerges as an important way to share different perspectives and to make connections. And a broker role can be played by individuals, institutions, but equally technology or certain instruments can be seen to play a role in brokerage, with, for example, certain instruments being observed to be common across cultural genres. So I have some things to finish, including the social network analysis and the qualitative analysis from the online survey, the integrative review, and finally synthesizing the findings from these 4 studies to inform the program logic. And here are some relevant references. And I welcome any feedback or comments or contact from anyone that's interested in the studies. Thank you.